So just going to start the recording because we really should have had this meeting in public. So what we're going to do is put it online straight after. So if everyone can be mindful of what they say, please. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Jyoti. I think it's now 5 o'clock. So I think we're ready to start, if that's okay. So good evening, everyone. I hope you've all managed to get in and you can hear me and we can hear each other. If we can use the stream for comments as we normally do and mute ourselves when we're not in so that it's easy for everyone to hear, I'd be grateful. So first of all, can we start first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. I know we have Karen Kemble who's sent in apologies, and Jyoti, there was somebody else, was there?
There was, yeah, Mr. Qatar.
Lovely, thank you. So if we can record those two absences, please.
John, can I just interrupt? Stephen Forbes sends his apologies. He's on annual leave.
Thank you. That's great. So that's Stephen as well. Anybody else? No? Okay, in which case, can we record those as apologies for absence? Declarations of interest, just cover that. I don't think there's, if you'd like to comment, please, if there's anyone that needs to declare an interest for tonight's meeting. No, I see no declarations, so can we record that too? And I've had no further communications. I don't know if anyone else has had any communications from members. No?
No.
Lovely. Okay, so if we can move to item number 2, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of September. Thank you. They were sent out a week or so ago. I hope we've all had a chance to look at them. So if we're happy, we'll go to the minutes of agenda item 2, page 3. Is there anybody that has anything that they wish to bring up on the minutes before we go in for accuracy? No hands up. Okay, so if we can go through page by page, if we start page 3, is there any accuracy items on page 3? No. Okay, page 4. Page 5. And finally, page 6. Okay, in which case they look like an accurate set of minutes from the last meeting, which we're happy to sign off afterwards. Great, thank you very much. Okay, before we go further, just something for the minutes from the last meeting. Can we confirm that I can see Melvin's with us? Melvin was elected as the primary academy representative, so welcome, Melvin. And I know Elroy's there somewhere also as the secondary academy rep, so welcome, Elroy. Lovely, thank you. If we can record that in the minutes. Okay, so we're going to move into the main body of the meeting. Can I just share, I'm sure we're all experiencing the challenges of staff absence at the moment, wherever we are. And so that follows through in the preparation for today's meeting as well. I know we had a document pack. There are, within the document pack, all items bar item 5 and item 6 are covered, and those will be presented today. But I know that in the council too, they've had some challenge with staff absence. So we'll go through the items on the agenda as they are, but there'll be 2 elements that aren't in the document pack. Lovely. So if we can move to item number 3. David, are you there for the Hounslow Education Partnership annual report?
Thank you very much, John. Good evening, everybody. So you will recall that the council has to undertake a supervisory responsibility in relation to the operation of a school's company. In our case, therefore, we work very closely, as you know, with Hounslow Education Partnership, and indeed the finances are then reviewed by our finance team on an annual basis as part of that supervisory responsibility. And we have previously arranged that the way in which we can best conduct that responsibility is really through the schools forum. And so Christine has reviewed the finances following Cormac's submission of those after audit, and then it is an annual task really for us to undertake this piece of work. And linked to that, we also have the 5-year dedicated schools grant reserve that was allocated to HEP in its setting up phase, and that was allocated to be split over 5 years. And we used this meeting to trigger, in this case, the third payment to HEP, subject to Schools Forum being satisfied that things are all where they should be. And that happens through a process where we actually devolve that money through a school improvement grant to all schools, and schools then in effect commit that funding back to HEP. And that was an arrangement, though cumbersome, was an arrangement that the ESFA required us to do in order that schools could decide for themselves, and it wasn't down to the Schools Forum deciding on their behalf. So Cormac is obviously here to answer questions that relate much more to the detail of this, but I have undertaken the kind of overview and then work with finance. Next slide, please, Anita. So many of us attended the annual general meeting of HEP at the beginning of October, and colleagues will have seen the annual report, which highlights some of the school improvement activities, some of which are listed there, not an exhaustive list, but that HEP has been working on over the last year, despite the challenges caused by COVID. Next slide, please. HEP has a number of very clear strategic priorities that are well rehearsed, and particularly are focused upon the needs of the most vulnerable children and young people in our schools, but also very much at the centre of school improvement and developing high quality school leadership. So I think we're all familiar with those haven't changed. And then the HEP obviously has to run as a business. It has to be able to be sustainable, and it's in its early years, part of the pump priming through the dedicated school grant reserve is to give it the capacity to grow and to respond to changing needs and to grow its infrastructure in order to be sustainable after that 5-year period. The financial summary for the year, and all the details of this are in more all of this is in more detail in your pack, but you can see there the way in which the ins and outs have worked. The COVID context this year has meant that some of the planned activities have had to be pushed forward. These refer to the ring fence funds for activities that were commissioned. Local authority is commissioning HEP on a number of fronts, so some of those activities have been carried over, and indeed there were reserves previously from last year. That does mean that the carry forward is higher than might have been anticipated or was anticipated at £248,000, but is largely reflective of that. And of course, Cormac will tell you more, but clearly it is about building enough of a safety net for the operation without meaning that it is accruing undue amounts of funding. Next one, please, Anita. So then coming to the devolution of the school improvement grant to schools, you'll see there the breakdown of the total, which was just over £500,000 in year one. So that it divided that and profiled, and this was at the request of HEP to give a forward weighting in one, and then we're now on to the year three. The £82,000 is now profiled across the schools, and it does refer to the schools that were in existence when the reserve built up. So, for example, new schools that have opened since then are not included in this. In most cases, for most schools, and I think Cormac will give detail if you want detail, but I think it pretty much was 100% return, where schools accepted that this was, those who are members of HEP accepted it was good use of their money. there are a minority of schools who aren't members of HEP who clearly would use it for some other purpose. So the 82 probably doesn't translate quite into 82 when it gets into HEP's bank account. So really then to open up, perhaps if we just scroll back to the recommendations, please, Anita, at the beginning, to ask if there are questions or clarifications or items for discussion that you would like to engage me in, or Cormac, or indeed Christine, who has reviewed the finances.
Okay, so out to anybody that wishes to ask any of those people. Ewan.
So there's not an embarrassing silence, but David, you mentioned pretty much 100% return rate, and maybe it's for Cormac. Is that still the situation, Cormac? Anybody dropped out, or has anybody come back in, maybe?
Hi, Ewan. No, nobody thankfully has dropped out. We have increased membership by one school, which was Hounslow Heath Infant and Nursery this year. In terms of the returning of the school improvement grant, as David highlighted, it's £82,000 in terms of the drawdown, but the monies that would sit in HEP total 76,000, and that is because for those schools that are not HEP members, they would retain that school improvement grant.
Thanks, Cormac.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to ask any questions either of David, of Cormac, or Christine, in fact? Okay, Ewan, I think if you put your hand down, if that's right, just it's the only way I can see who's lovely. Thank you. Okay, in which case, if we turn then to the recommendations, so we are being asked to support the LA in discharging its statutory supervisory role in relation to the operation and finances of HEP by, first of all, a review of the HEP Year 2 operation and finances, which David's just taken us through and is in the pack, and endorsement of the HEP business plan priorities for 2020-2021, which is in the pack. I would just like to take that forward to the forum. Are we all happy to endorse that, please? If you're not, please let me know now. Okay, so I'm assuming on the silence that we're happy with that first item. And then the second is to approve the triggering of the Year 3 allocation from the DSG reserve that's earmarked for school improvement activity, and that's set out as a global sum in section 7 and by school in Appendix B in the pack. Again, can I see if anybody wishes to oppose or raise an issue at this point? And if then by our silence, can I assume that we're happy to agree to that triggering? Lovely. Okay, I think that has been agreed to. Thank you, David. Thank you, Cormac.
Could I just in conclusion, just use this opportunity to give the local authority endorsement of the work that HEP is doing with all of our schools, and to thank all of the head teachers who are to its work, and to Cormac as director for driving it confidently in what have been a very difficult year.
Thank you. Yes, that's something we could all endorse, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 4. Chris C is going to pick this one up, I think, on the financial impact of the low take-up of early years places. Chrissy, are you there?
I'm here. Yes.
Lovely.
Good. Hello, everybody. So this report doesn't come with recommendations. It's more awareness raising about the impact of the pandemic on the early years sector, and really the fragility of the childcare market as it stands at the moment. So this report contains a lot of information around a survey of some of our private providers, and that is representative of day nurseries and preschools, so private provision, not schools, and also not childminders. And that's not to underestimate the importance of childminders in meeting the statutory duties of the council, and also many other of the areas of importance around early education and childcare, but we just haven't surveyed that group at the moment. So it kind of sets out the impact of the pandemic and just raises some issues going forward. So as this slide says, the council is relying on, when we say PVIs, so that's private, voluntary and independent, but as I said, I'm talking about daycare, full daycare and preschools. Not just the statutory duties in terms of sufficiency of childcare and the free entitlement places, but also a really critical role in supporting economic recovery, and about outcomes for children. We don't need to rehearse the importance and the impact of high quality early years on future outcomes for children, but also early intervention and narrowing attainment gaps. So it's a really critical part of supporting young children. And this first slide just gives a flavour of how many children at any one point may be accessing either childcare places for 0 to 5s, or indeed, in addition to that, the free entitlement. So a significant number of children. Okay, so these are small businesses, and income is generated through the payment of childcare places. What we often talk about in this forum is the free entitlement funding, because that funding is passported from central government through the council to our private providers, but also, of course, fee-paying places as well. So when during the first lockdown, the childcare providers had to shut at very short notice, as did schools. Apart from children, same eligibility criteria: vulnerable children, key worker children, or those with EHCPs. So when the settings were allowed to open again in June, shortly after that, we did a survey just to try and get a sense of what the impact had been for them. And these were some of the responses that we had to, of our 99 providers, we had 67 responses. And of those, 60% had accrued debts as a consequence of having to close. Many still had the same outgoings, but not the income. And the majority did close, by the way, because they some didn't have any children needing a place. Some had 1 or 2, and that was not financially viable to run with 1 or 2 children. Some, of course, stayed open. So 69% expected to operate at a loss over the next 6 months. Only 45% at that time thought it was very likely that they would still be operating in June 21. And 51% were considering redundancies. So it was a bleak picture in June for the providers. When we came back in September, and we're expecting higher occupancy rates, because in June, although the settings opened again in June, there was quite low take up. For a variety of reasons. There was a lot of anxiety amongst families about sending their young children back and preferring to keep them at home, keep them safe. It was not statutory. There were changes in employment, a whole raft of reasons why people weren't taking up the childcare that they had before. In October, we did a further survey to see what the occupancy rates were like, and again, it continued to be low. Although it had been increasing week by week since the June reopening, it was not up to current previous levels. And at that point in time, when we did the survey, or when the claims came in, rather than the 71% occupancy of the previous autumn, it was 53%. That varied a lot across the borough. There were some settings who were full, there were some who were not full, and some with very few children. So it has really made it a fragile market for many of our providers. Just to make a point there about the 71% occupancy last autumn, typically autumn is a low take-up term. Many of the children have transferred to school nurseries or reception, but the majority are going into school nurseries then. So it takes some time then to build up occupancy, which is a point that I'll make later in the presentation, that this is a particular problem because the business model is often that during the summer term will be full occupancy, and where there will be some profit, which then supports the low occupancy in the autumn. But of course, that didn't happen this year. People were not making that profit to support with the autumn occupancy. Many were actually accruing debts. Thank you. So we also asked about just predictions around incomings and outgoings. And as I said previously, many providers had higher outgoings than incoming during the lockdown and lockdown 1 and since. And that continues to be so. And it was they were forecasting a bleak future in terms of making ends meet and balancing the financial books. So that was just their predictions of how many children they were taking in, so on and so forth. Thank you. So, as I've said, there are other contributory factors to sustainability as well as the occupancy. I've already said that the summer term, the full occupancy supports the autumn low occupancy, and that hasn't happened this year. Many of our providers, well, at 81 out of 87, say although there is some take up of the free entitlement places, that the rate for those places doesn't actually cover costs, and how that funding gap is bridged is by the fee paying places, and those places are down. So they are running at a loss on those places and not being able to bridge the financial gap. So during the lockdown and since, many settings faced a drop in the income, but also faced increased staffing costs. This was having to cover staff who were either had contracted the virus or were isolating, and that might have been through additional hours for staffing, or it might have been through higher costs through agencies. And of course, there were the costs incurred to make their settings COVID safe once they were open. They didn't get support for any of those measures, any additional financial support for those measures that they had to put in place. Some providers had access loans to support their sustainability during the first lockdown, and of course those loans will need to be repaid, but that's in the context of continued financial pressures. So during the summer and autumn term, there has been some protection with the free entitlement places. We didn't claw back funding in the summer term if children were absent due to the virus or isolating. And in the autumn term, there was a direction from the DfE to fund settings as if the virus wasn't happening. So we could look at the autumn 19 take-up rates, and if that was higher than this autumn, then we could pay them equivalent to the take-up in the previous year. But we have not yet been told what the arrangements will be for spring term, and if the trend continues as is, then it will be low take up. So if there isn't protection, that will start to impact more on businesses that are already struggling. We also have high vacancy rates in our nursery classes in schools, and so that adds to the picture at the moment that supply is outweighing demand. So we have a number of places that are vacant. So this is our vacancies in school nurseries. They were high last year, as you can see, and they're slightly higher this year. It's changed slightly in terms of the wards and where the vacancies sit, but that's quite a significant number of vacancies. So this doesn't help the childcare market as well, in that there's not that demand for the places, and there are empty places in schools as well. So this was just making the point around the protection that we were allowed to put in place. This is an example of what the impact would have been without this protection, and therefore what the impact may be in spring if that protection doesn't continue to exist. As I said before, it's a mixed picture across the borough. About 50% of our providers had less occupancy than the previous year. And had there not been the protection, the financial impact would have ranged for the 3 and 4 year old places from just over £1,000 up to £36,000. And there were quite a number in the higher bracket. And for the 2-year-olds, without the protection, the financial impact would have been from £119 up to £24,000. And of course, for some settings fall into both those brackets in the higher end range. So for small businesses, that's a substantial amount of money. So in terms of the DSG position, which is obviously the focus for this forum, we did have a contingency in place, and we have had to use some of that contingency. We had 1.4 million, and we've had two pressures. One is that there are more children than we anticipated when we were modelling the budget, and also the consequence of paying the autumn 19 figures at a higher rate. So our contingency will go down to 0.6 million. So I am posing the question to the DFE around if the protective measures, if there are any in spring, lead to an overspend in our DSG early years block, will there be some funding for councils where that is the case? And I think that's the last slide. Yes. Oh, is there? Oh no. So there are some. Yes. Sorry. The risk factors for the budget setting. Is the final slide. So we know that there will be risks in the 21-22. Demand for places is very difficult to predict because it's based on so many different factors now. Changing economic circumstances, attitudes and concerns about the virus, different working arrangements, so on and so forth. So as I said, we don't know what the position will be with next year's budget. We don't know if it will be based on the 21 census. If it is, that's likely to be low, and there will be pressures following that.
Thank you, Chrissy. Okay, if I open the field out now to anybody who wishes to ask Chrissy any questions, I can see Eileen, you're there.
Thank you, John. Just a couple of things, Chrissy. Where you're talking about the kind of low uptake amongst 2-year-olds, is this directly related to the birth rate as well? Because if it is around those parents that are nervous, concerned, etc., could there be some kind of borough-wide promotion of the places that are available, similar to when we in schools opened all our preschools and a lot of information was circulated to parents? I say this because I'm sure it's similar in other schools. We've had quite a huge increase in families falling in the free school meals category due to the current circumstances, and there's more. We have an increase of disadvantaged children, and that obviously will have a knock-on effect that their younger siblings, when they get to that preschool age, would be entitled to the 2-year-old funding as well. So I just wondered if there was any kind of promotion to be done to kind of reassure parents and actually make sure those places are taken up.
So we have been working with our communications team since settings were open again in June, and there's been a lot of publicity on various social media around promoting the measures that settings are put in place, and we've had videos of parents whose children have gone back talking about how they do feel safe and how their children are benefiting from being back. So we have done quite a bit, but we need to continue. Absolutely, Eileen. Thank you.
Okay, and just one more question. Can I just ask why school preschools were not included in the data? Because for those of us that run preschools, they are very much a business as well, as in we rely on income, particularly from fee-paying parents. And it'd be interesting to know across Hounslow how many preschools based in schools are also currently financially disadvantaged.
Yeah, so we can certainly do that, Eileen.
I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
No, thanks for raising that important point.
Thank you, Eileen. Anybody else wish to ask Chrissy anything about this report? Okay, Chrissy, I've got a question just out of interest on the predictions on sustainability. Do you know why 30% anticipated that in January and March 2021 that their income will be less than their outgoings? Is it so because that looks rosier compared to their December predictions and their November? Is that just because it was further out at the time they did the survey?
Can I just go back to the slide and understand the question? Sorry.
I hope I've got it right now. It's the predictions on sustainability.
Yeah. So I pulled that up. So in January to March 21,
you've got
income
30%.
will be less. Sorry, John.
Sorry, you've got 30% that will say that income will be less than outgoings, and that compares to 63% in December and 67% in November. That looks like they anticipate things being rosier in January. Have I got that right?
Well, it's an optimistic view, isn't it? That by then maybe things will be. Nobody knows for sure, so it's just a positive approach that perhaps things will have settled down and children will be coming back by then.
When the survey was done. Lovely, thank you. And Chrissy, you were really wanting Schools Forum to note all of this. There's no action you want to take at this point.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for preparing that. I'm sure it tells a story that will be repeated elsewhere a number of times. Thank you, Chrissy.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely. Let's move on. So the next item is agenda item number 5, which is the 2020-21 high needs provision as at October 2020. And Christine, I think you're leading on that. That's page 25 in the pack. Christine, are you there?
Yes. This is another information item for Schools Forum. There's no recommendations in this item either. This is an update on a piece of work that we did last October to try and unpick where is the high needs budget being spent. So last year we looked at where the money was going in October 2019, and this is where the money is going in October 2020. So there's a lot of information in this pack, so we'll go through it quite quickly and highlight some of the key areas. You'll notice in the slide pack, some of the slides have got 2 graphs on them and some only have 1. The ones that the slides that have 2 graphs on them are where there was a bigger difference between 2019 and 2020, so we can see where that is. So this slide you'll have seen before. This is the breakdown of where our £56.5 million budget goes. You'll be familiar that the big chunks in here are the local authority maintained special schools, which is the pink block, and that's 32% of our spend, and the independent schools, which is the brown block, which is 20%. So the next slide compares the how the pupils are spread, pupils that are based in school provision. That's not all of the budget, but the bit of the budget that's spent in school-based provision, how that compares with the number of children. So you'll see the big chunk of the pupil numbers are in mainstream schools, but that's 35% of our pupils, just 9% of our spend. Independent schools are 11% of our pupils, but 20% of our spend. And special schools are 32% of our pupils, but 32% of our spend. So you can see very clearly that obviously the unit costs in mainstream schools are much lower than what independent schools would be. So the next set of slides focuses on the pupils in the schools who are supported in specialist provision in schools. So we have got 181 additional children between October 2019 and October 2020. And the numbers of children who are in Hounslow provision that live outside the borough is stable year on year. So the next group of slides, these focus on the primary need of the child, and they're sort of ordered in terms of the sort of biggest numbers of primary needs come first. So one of the biggest growth in primary needs over the last year has been in ASD, as you can see on the slide, and those additional children are distributed across all types of our provision, mainstream schools, special schools, some in independent schools. So the next couple of slides, if we can flick through the slides, we'll have a look at them, we'll stop. But the next one to note is SEMH. Yes, SEMH is another category where it's a smaller number of children in the SEMH category, but it's quite a big percentage. There's sort of 19% increase in the number of those pupils. And in addition to these pupils who are based in schools, we also have about 24 young people with SEMH who are in Woodbridge Park. So you can see, we go back one. So the SEMH children going into independent schools, quite a lot of them in Hounslow special schools as well. So there's an increase in the number of SEMH children in specialist provision over the last year. Physical disabilities, quite a cohort that's smaller year on year, and most of those young people mainstream schools and other forms of generally local authority specialist provision, very few in independent schools. So we can move on. SPLD, this is one of our categories that is reduced. So we'll see a bit more about that when we look at SEN centres a bit later on. Visual impairment pupils, if we go back to another very specialist category, most of those young people are in mainstream schools, SEN centres, a few in out-of-borough specialist provision. And this is a sort of summary of some of the other categories of pupil numbers, where we didn't do graphs for them because they're sort of predominantly in one of the categories. So most of the MLD children are in mainstream schools. Most of the SLD children are in special schools. Most of the children with a hearing impairment are in SEN centres. You were in independent schools. All of our PMLD children are in special schools. And we have a number of children who are not classified on the system, so they're all in special schools. So the next group goes through some of the types of provision and looking at who is in this type of provision. So the SEN centres, the kind of interesting bit of this is the SPLD line. So this is one of the areas of the SEN centre provision that we have reduced following the review of SEN centres that we did last year, because the demand, particularly for SPLD places, was reducing. So we have reduced the number of places that we're commissioning, and also MLD has reduced a bit, so we've reduced some of that provision as well. So the next slides show the who is in each type of provision by this sort of key stage. You can see how the cohorts of children have changed year on year. And you can see how some of the bars change. Some of the scales are not necessarily the same side for side, so you need to allow for that. And obviously within each key stage there are different numbers of year groups. So sometimes there's like key stage 2 is generally the biggest bar on a lot of the graphs, but then there's more year groups in that than some of the other categories. So we can see that in our own SEN centres in Hounslow, most of the children in there are primary age children. So we'll see on some of the other graphs where those primary children go at secondary school, because we have much fewer SEN centre places for secondary age children in the borough. So the next one is handful of children in out-of-borough SEN centres. Special schools, this is where we increased the budget quite significantly for this financial year. So we've got 58 more places, most of them filled by Hounslow residents, and some vacant places, which I know from talking to some of the special schools, they're assessing potential young people for those, so we don't expect those to be there for much longer. So the next chart shows the age breakdown in our own special schools, and again, you can see that the majority of our provision is for primary age children. Now we have a bit more secondary provision than last year, and then a lot of the children who at secondary age that we can't accommodate in our special schools or SEN centres, they go out of borough into the independent sector, which is the next graph. So you can see we have slightly more primary age children out of the borough this year than last year, and also some more sixth form kids and key stage 4, key stage 3, so slight increases in a lot of key stages going out to independent schools, but the bigger movements are in our own in-borough provision, which is what we expected to see, because we're seeing now the impact of the increase in school places that we've created in borough. Also a big increase in the number of young people being supported in mainstream schools, which is encouraging, because they cost a lot less, and again quite a big increase at key stage 2. Quite a few more primary children being supported in our own mainstream schools than secondary. So the next graph is the out of borough mainstream. Then we move to special free schools. So this is the free school in the borough, and you can see those kids sort of moving up the year groups between 2019 and 2020. The next graph should be the out of borough special free schools. Again, we've got more secondary age children out of the borough again. So that's the sort of end of the charts about school-based provision. The next set of charts is focused on Woodbridge Park, where the council commissions quite a lot of different types of provision, including pupil referral units, SEMH provision for Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, and other specialist provision for, particularly the KATE provision for older young people. So we'll go through these. So for Woodbridge Park, we have got slides that show the number of places we've commissioned, the number of pupils supported in the previous academic year, because people go in and out of Woodbridge Park. It's not a static population. The places that are filled at mid-October in each of the years, and an indication of how many pupils stay for more than a year. So the thing you'll notice on these slides is that Woodbridge Park has been affected by COVID, because the number of pupils supported in the previous academic year on most of the slides is lower, slightly lower than in 2018-19 academic year. But the places filled at mid-October is similar. So take up of places is similar, but obviously there was less movement in Woodbridge Park, particularly during the summer term, as a lot of schools were closed. And Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 includes about 24 SEMH kids. If we move through those, please, Anita, you can see what we've got there. The last group of slides is young people with SEND in FE provision. Well, the FE provision is basically colleges, what you might consider to be an FE college, like West Thames College and other independent specialist colleges. So it's not a school provision, because they're you'll have noticed some of the older children in some of our particularly independent schools in the school slides, but these are young people who are in college. These numbers are expressed as FTEs, because not everyone is full-time. You'll see it's quite a significant increase in the number of FTEs in FE provision between 2019 and October 2020. And there was a resulting increase in that budget as well. But within this, there are very significant variation in the unit costs of placements. So the next chart shows you where the young people are. So we've got sort of 7 main institutions that young people are placed with. And they're in the table on the slide, and then the remaining young people are spread over quite a few different institutions. So you'll not be surprised to see West Thames, Richmond College, sort of Great Oaks, Ealing, Hammersmith and West London, sort of more local colleges on there. And the last slide has got unit costs, sort of average unit costs. You see, there's been although there's been a big increase in the number of young people in this provision, the most of them are cost us less than £5,000 a year, and there's been a bit of movement in the slightly higher cost ones, £20,000 to £50,000 a year. That's gone up a bit, but then some of the £5,000 to £20,000 a year categories have gone down, and we don't have very many what you might describe as high cost. So I think I describe high cost in this context more than £50,000 a year. There's a handful of those young people in specialist college provision. So I think that's the end of the slides. So this is a sort of, hopefully you've seen a few things that are interesting in there. So it's a whistle-stop tour of what we spend the high needs budget on.
Lovely. Thank you, Christine. Okay, so let's open the floor. Does anyone like to comment, ask Christine anything about the presentation? Obviously, there's more in the pack. We went through it fairly quickly. Elroy, thank you.
Hi. I'm just wondering how it is that places are decided, like how do we decide what providers we use for these places with regards to for high needs funding?
Anita, are you able to answer that? Because it's your service that does that.
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer that one, Christine. I've lost my view of everybody now. Right, yeah, so Elroy, on the whole, we always try and use local provision because obviously we exhaust our local offer first. Some of the places are as a result of tribunal where we're ordered, and some are just because it's so difficult to place some children that we use a dynamic purchasing vehicle through the West London Alliance, and we just find somewhere that can take certain types of children because actually their needs are really complex.
Okay, thanks, Anita.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to ask either Christine or Anita on this presentation? Okay, I take by the silence, Christine, that you've taken us through very well. Thank you very much. I think we're over to you for the next agenda item, which is a finance update. So if you're ready, we'll hand over. Elroy, could you put your hand down if possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. So this finance update covers three things. So we've heard a lot about take up of early years places. We've heard quite a bit about high needs places, but there's a section in this presentation about what's happening with take up of primary and secondary school places, which obviously affects our funding allocation for 2021-22 financial year, which we should find out in mid-December. We're talking about Heston Primary School balances, which is one of the subjects that came up at last Schools Forum, and also the budget, where we are on the budget for this financial year on the high needs budget, and the other parts of the DSG. So there aren't any decisions for them to make in this update either, and we'll upload these slides after the meeting because they're not in your pack. So Anita, thank you. So the first slide shows the vacant places in primary and secondary schools. So you can see that there's quite a few vacant places in primary schools, quite varied, particularly in year R and year 2, sort of over 6 or more % vacant. The vacancy rate in secondary schools is lower, but still higher percentage at year 7. So this is a trend that other London boroughs are experiencing as well. The vacancy rate in schools is higher than it has been in previous years, and there is a meeting some of our colleagues have with DFE tomorrow about some of the consequences of that. So the next slide is a little bit of information about where the vacancies are, and you can see that they're not evenly distributed across schools either. There's a lot of the primary vacancies are in Chiswick and Brentford area, and with fewer vacancies in central Hounslow and more in Heston and Cranford. Within each of those primary planning areas, there are some schools who are full or nearly full, and others that have got quite significant numbers of vacancies across many of the school years. Secondary schools, many secondary schools have got some vacancies, but it's about less than 2% of their school population. There's other groups of secondary schools that have between 2 and 7% vacancies, and the 2 schools that have what looks like a very high number of vacancies are the 2 studio schools. So again, sort of schools affected in different ways. It will be interesting to see how this affects the amount of schools block that we get in December. And the last slide in this group gives you the comparative figures. So the bold lines are October 2020, and the lighter type lines are October 2019. So you'll see that the secondary vacancy rate has increased from 2.3 to 2.6%, and there's been a much more significant increase in the primary school vacancy rate from 3.9 to 5.4%. So quite a number of schools across the borough struggling financially at the minute, in addition to all the COVID pressures that they have. So we move on to Heston Primary School balances. We brought reports at last Schools Forum about school balances at 31st of March 2020. Just before the School Forum meeting, we had some additional information came in from Heston Primary, so we have met with them since Schools Forum. We had expected their excess balance to be around about 200,000 at 31st of March. The actual excess balance was much higher than that, 484,000. The reason for that significant difference was delays to all of the capital projects that the school had in their use of balances return. Those projects have now been substantially completed. Many of them have been actually completed now. And the school also had the remainder of their excess balance earmarked for staffing costs over a 2-year period in the future. This school has got 5.5% vacancies, slightly higher than the average. So one of the schools alerted me to the fact we needed to look at where we are with primary school vacancies. And they've got quite a few vacancies in their nursery, hence holding excess balances to help support staffing costs in the future. So we need to decide whether we claw back balances from Heston, claw back any of their excess balances. At Schools Forum in September, we agreed a number of principles around whether we would or wouldn't claw back excess balances from schools. These are schools who've had excess balances for more than 3 years. So we agreed at September Schools Forum that we wouldn't claw back excess balances that were linked to delayed capital projects, provided the delays were out of the control of the school and the projects were completed or on track to be completed at the end of August. So based on our discussions with Heston Primary, the council is happy that those criteria have been met, and the council is not proposing to claw back any of the school's excess balances at the end of March 2020. So this school will still have excess balances at March 2021, or they should have based on their projections, but that remaining excess balance is earmarked for staffing. So the last section of the slide are an update where we were with the DSG budget for this financial year. So you can see that the schools block, there is no projected variance. The early years block, as Chrissy has highlighted, there's quite a bit of uncertainty. We don't know what will happen with the spring funding allocations, but we're assuming that it'll be similar to the summer and the autumn, in that we will essentially pay what we did last year, and that will reduce the contingency balance that we had in the budget very significantly. But we're assuming at the minute we've got enough contingency to cover the impact of that. The high needs block, there is the spend is £0.7 million higher than we budgeted, so £700,000 higher than budgeted. We also had a reduction in our DSG income so in July, DFE revised the DSG allocations, and we've lost 300,000 of high needs block funding through what they call inputs and outputs adjustments. So these are adjustments for our Hounslow residents that go out of borough to school, and also to other boroughs residents that come into Hounslow into our provision. So we've lost out a bit there. So at the minute our deficit on the high needs block is projected about 6.9 million instead of the 5.9 million that was budgeted. So the next slide gives you some bit more information. So we have been doing a lot of work with Anita's team during the year to sort of track the data that we use to set the budget and what is actually happening in practice. So when we under or overspend on the DSG, on the high needs block, we're trying to understand, well, which bit of the budget are we under or overspending on, and why? So that tracking has indicated we've got we're spending more on provision in mainstream schools than we budgeted, because we've got more pupils in mainstream schools and a slightly higher average unit cost than we'd budgeted at. In some ways that's good, because were those pupils not in mainstream schools and in more specialist provision, it would cost even more. So the SEN centres and the special schools we had budgeted based on the places we expected to commission in September 2020, and the actual occupancy is slightly different, so it's costing us a little bit more. But at the minute we're spending a little bit less on independent and non-maintained provision than we had budgeted for, as our pupil numbers and our average unit costs are slightly below budget. We also have a budget pressure on what's known as educated other. So these are pupils in alternative provision, and we're doing some work with Woodbridge Park at the minute to look at some new provision for those pupils that will hopefully bring some of that budget pressure down next year. And we've also got a reduced DSG allocation. So that's sort of where our £1 million projected overspend comes from at the minute. I think that's the last slide, so I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, well, let's open out the field. Any questions for Christine on the finance update? Doesn't look like any hands up, Christine, so I think you're okay. Can I ask, just on the Heston Primary School balance, does the decision of the local, or rather the recommendation of the local authority, require either approval or ratification from Schools Forum that you don't claw back?
Well, we're applying the principles that we agreed at Schools Forum last.
So you're happy
meeting.
to go?
So we
can go ahead as we are.
We are happy, unless anybody else isn't.
It's very quiet out there, so I think you're okay. Okay, lovely. In which case, let's move on. Thank you, Christine. If we move on, I think, Anita, you're picking up the next one, which is the DSG High Needs Budget Overspend Reduction Update. Anita, is that for you? Yep, you're there.
Yes, I am here. That's it. I've found, as soon as I click on the microphone or camera, then the presentation disappears, but I'm up and running, so I'll just put the slides up again.
Thank you.
So, colleagues, this is really a presentation just to update Schools Forum on the transformation programme and provide some of the specific details on the implementation plans. I'm aware that Zara did present on my behalf last week at the head teachers briefing, so some of these slides would have been used then. So based on all the discovery work, we and through our data and analysis, we've proposed an approach to take forward, and we're proposing to create 8 separate work streams which will contribute towards transforming SEND and our alternative provision offer over the next 5 years. And as you'll see on my left, there's a list of those work streams in terms of effective use of resources, partnership working and joint commissioning, SEND practice, SEND policy, inclusive local provision, and managing the market, information, advice and support, and preparing for adulthood, which many of you will be familiar with. I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, because I will discuss some of this further on in the presentation. But what we've provided really is a very high level overview of what we're hoping each work stream will achieve. Just in terms of further information, we really want the information, advice and support is very much about the communication. It's about ensuring that everybody knows what our local offer is, and that we have a very clearly defined SEND early help offer as well. Preparing for adulthood again, it's really about trying to improve the processes to support young people as they transition, but also that, again, everybody understands what pathways might be. It's also hopefully about addressing some of the gaps in provision. And market management is a really important part of this strategy, as you've seen from Christine's presentation, where actually we have fewer numbers of young people and children in independent and non-maintained, but actually the costs are quite significant. So that those areas are our key focus. And we also want to, so I'm going to talk through now a bit about what we've achieved so far. And what's been completed to date, and actually an awful lot of work behind the scenes is taking place despite the current circumstances, and we're very grateful actually for colleagues who've given up time still to meet with us and also speak to us through this process. As you saw again from Christine's slides, we've actually really increased specialist provision in the borough. Not only have we increased what we thought were planned places in special schools and agreed opening classes earlier than expected, we are also expecting additional capacity with an ASD centre at Boulder, which will be a secondary offer, as well as the SEMH free school, which will be due to open in 2020. And we've already established partnership with the West London Commissioning Alliance, and all our requests for the independent sector actually go through that dynamic purchasing process. In terms of practice and policy, obviously many of you may know Georgina Herry, who joined us over a year ago, and actually since the recruitment of that post, it's been really fundamental to working with all of you in our SEND support training development, working very closely with Hounslow Education Partners to establish that effective SENCO network. We've also reviewed our SEND phase transfer process, and through this year we are working with colleagues with that new updated timeline, and it's also given us an opportunity to really explore some of the challenges that we've got in terms of the number of places and the demand for specialist provision. The programme development has continued. As you're all aware, the needs analysis has been completed. And as you've seen from Christine's presentation, we've really now got 2 years worth of analysis on trends, and we'll be able to make some really useful comparisons. We held our webinar for partners in October as planned, and thanks to colleagues who did attend, or if you allowed your SENCOs to join that webinar, it was very useful. There's clear governance in place with John obviously co-chairing the High Needs Programme Board, and that board reporting to the SEND Joint Area Board. So I just got quite a few slides, but I won't go through them in great detail because we'll make sure that you have these in your pack. But I just wanted to give a bit of an illustration on how robust our project plans are and what we're aiming to achieve. So this work stream is on the effective use of resources, and this is about making sure what we use, we get best value for money. And we are, as Christine showed in her slides, actually monitoring every placement for every child with an EHC plan on a monthly basis, which highlights numbers as well as a change in unit costs. So this is really about reviewing budget streams and identifying opportunities really for good value for money. For example, those students where they're educated other than at school because they haven't got a school place, we're working with Woodbridge Park to see to develop a more local offer that would be better value for money for those. And we are also reviewing some of the cases where children are in placements away from home to see if there are opportunities for them to be placed more locally. We've started a review of our special schools, which will look at pathways, because I think what we're starting to see really are some issues around transition, especially pressures on Year 7 places. So we'll be looking. We've started task and finish groups already. We've already had several meetings to look at the top up and the distribution of top up funding, which is again is quite it's a legacy, and we want to look at that in more detail, like we did with the SEND Centre review. But we also want to look at the pathways. So, you know, where are children and young people going, at what points, you know, have we got gaps, and as well as looking at admission criteria, and ultimately, you know, do we need to actually change what's being offered in those schools. SEND practice is really about, you know, this particular project is actually led by Georgina, where we're developing that SEND support offer and working with all of you. There's been some close liaison with Hounslow Education Partnership and promoting that school-to-school support offer with SEND, as well as a training brochure, you know, support for SENCOs and other. I think some really important and very good work has gone on there already. I updated Schools Forum last time a little bit about the complex cases and the fact that we have reviewed all of our students in the non-maintained or independent sector. So we're just now really working through those on a case-by-case level. This project plan is really about our SEND data model. We really need a sufficiency strategy. It's a key piece of work to underpin really the programme, so that we can forward plan to forecast demand and meet need in the future. And this hasn't been done for SEND for several years. It's more complex, as children with EHC plans can follow different expected pathways, unlike their peers. So children don't just maybe go from mainstream to mainstream, they could go to various different combinations or scenarios. And we want to be able to project that more accurately. And also we want to add in mitigations as we see our programme impacting on that deficit. And so we're myself and Zara and other parts of my team are progressing this, because we would like to get this plan actually done, as you see, by the beginning of 2021. Inclusive local provision is in some ways perhaps our most challenging, in us doing things differently to address the demand for EHC plans, which is still significant. As Christine's slides also showed, we've got still significant numbers of plans in borough. And you know, this is about trying to redistribute resources so that we can meet need earlier, and also developing that confidence further down the system and SEN support. And we're actually got some discussions underway to take this project forward. You see at the moment there isn't a project manager identified for this piece of work, but we will provide more of an update as we get through that. So obviously we need to be monitoring, are we making a difference, are the things that we're doing having a, you know, positive outcomes for children and young people. We don't want to make changes that affect the quality of what we're offering, as we know that children with SEND make good progress in Hounslow. But we do want to see some things changing. So we do want to see more children having support effectively at SEN support, which is pre-education, health and care plans. And we do actually want to see some of those requests coming down. We want to reduce, obviously, the number of new placements made at independent special schools, and we want to keep as many children and young people in school as possible. And this is very much about us changing our culture of thinking differently and strengthening our workforce, developing confidence of parents, as well as working with other professionals and health professionals to help to understand really what our offer is locally. We're also wanting to develop our local provision more, reduce reliance on independent special schools, and also want to strengthen our alternative provision offer. We still do have some challenges around some young people going out of borough to access certain elements of educational provision. So those are our sort of key indicators. So that the final slide is a slightly different topic. It's just really to update Forum further to the last meeting where we shared that we are now required to produce the management plan. To confirm, we have completed a draft so that it's ready for publishing. We need to demonstrate that we've engaged with stakeholders and Schools Forum, which see there's a list of dates and activities that have already taken place. And we will bring a plan to Schools Forum in the new year. So we need to publish it really in line with the setting of the 21-22 budgets. And we have engaged with many of you already through the process. And I think, yes, that's me done.
Lovely. Thank you, Anita. Okay, anybody got any questions, comments or anything for Anita and her presentation on the DSG High Needs Budget Overspend? Ian.
Hi everyone. I just want to say, Anita, that that's the level of detail there, and similar to the level of detail that Christine presented, is phenomenal. So just thank you for the hard work and all the work in the background with that, because I think it's really coming together now. And I think that fine level detail that we're now getting down to is going to mean that we're going to be able to make some real good movement on things. So I just wanted to say big thumbs up. Good stuff.
Lovely. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Ewan.
Yeah, similarly, Anita, thank you. I thought the clarity of the work streams is really good as well. So well done on that too. I suppose the question really is just about maybe the bit I'm not seeing is the financial projections and how this is going to cut down on that overspend that we do have. Have you started modelling what that might look like?
Yes, and Ewan, thanks for raising that, because I know Christine and I do discuss this, but we've not really been ready to really put finite figures, and we get challenged very well, I think, John, by yourself and colleagues at the High Needs Programme. I think we're aiming, when we finalise the management plan, to have more details about where the mitigations will be and how we will model costs. So hopefully after Christmas we'll be able to produce more information about the financial impact.
Yes, I think there's
thank you.
Thank you, and I think there's a sense of urgency at those meetings that I think we're all anxious to see the savings come about as well, because as colleagues have said, there's a lot of detail, and that granular detail is helpful. We now need to see it having impact, but I know that Anita and the team are working very hard on that in the meetings that I attend. Anybody else wish to comment, speak to Anita on this subject? Okay, I think then that silence suggests that Anita, you've presented very well. Thank you very much for that. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the last parts of the agenda, there's the forward plan. So if we can turn to that, it was the page 43 of the agenda pack went out. So we have two meetings set forward as online meetings. There's Monday the 18th of January at 5 o'clock and Monday the 1st of March at 5 o'clock. And the plan for the 18th of January is we will look at the schools 5 to 15 funding formula. We'll look at the Central Schools Services block budget, the early years block update, and the DSG High Needs Budget Overspend Reduction update. Okay, I think that just about draws us to the end. Is there anybody else has anything that they wish to bring up in terms of any other business? No. Okay, I just want to bring up one thing that came up in the East Partnership when we were sharing the outcomes of Schools Forum in our last meeting. There was a comment from some schools that felt when the data collection for the balance control mechanism was done for the last meeting, that there was rather short notice in the turnaround time that was required. So I know that there was a lot of work went into that, but there was a plea that if when we repeat it next year, we allow a bit more time for returns. There we are. Okay, well, if there are no further comments, can I thank all the LA officers that have put together the document packs, because I know you've done that against a backdrop of significant staff absence and so on. Can I thank everybody for their time this evening? It's an hour and 20 minutes that you're not going to get back elsewhere, but I'm grateful for you for attending. And I think at 6:20, that brings us to the end of tonight's Schools Forum. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Ewan.
Bye.